All right, welcome to Roots of Variety Experiences. I'm joined by Jeff Clements, co-founder and CEO of American Promise, which seeks the passage of the For Our Freedom constitutional amendment to restore reasonable limits on money in our campaigns and elections. So, Jeff, thanks for coming on today.
Glad to be here, Ben.
Just to start off, how did you get interested in the concept of money in politics? When did it come onto your radar to be something that became so important to you?
Well, I think it's on everyone's radar. Money in politics is now the number one concern of Americans, according to Pew Research. After the $20 billion election in 2024, Pew reported reducing money in politics as the top issue in the survey that they regularly do with Americans, ahead of inflation, immigration. So this is a deadly serious issue for the country. Money is totally out of control since the Supreme Court went on essentially a 5-decade experiment of making up a theory that it's free speech and striking down the anti-corruption laws. And we're now kind of at the end stages of that. A case argued today in the Supreme Court, maybe, which we filed a brief in, but it may be yet one more time the Supreme Court strikes down democratically enacted anti-corruption laws. So, I think of myself as just as another citizen, and fortunately feel that I have something to offer in the way of a solution that so many Americans want. My own pathway to this was through the law. I was a lawyer for many, many years in Boston and filed a brief in the Supreme Court in the Citizens United case. And, once believed, as a lawyer should, that constitutional issues argued in the courts will lead to constitutional answers. And unfortunately, it's clearly a dead end to try to get the Supreme Court to fix this problem that virtually every American wants fixed and frankly knows how to fix it. Most Americans support effective anti-corruption laws. We just can't have them because the Supreme Court tells us we can't. So that's why we're doing a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does seem like the Supreme Court continues to make decisions over time that seem anti democracy. If you really want true equality in the system, at what point was it that you kind of start to recognize that money in politics could get as bad as it is today? Like before this decision of the Supreme Court, were you following closely kind of the build up to that? Uh, Sort of what were you thinking at the time?
Well, as I said, I come to this as like almost every other American. I was never a campaign finance wonk. I, I was just, I was practicing law, and I was prosecuting and enforcing the public laws in Massachusetts in the Attorney General's office. None of that work really involved campaign finance. I did plenty of constitutional work. Um, but I was concerned for a long time. I think most Americans have been. This isn't a problem that came overnight. I think you can, whether you look at surveys or just talk to family and friends, it has been a long time since Americans believed that we had a representative government responding to the interests of the people rather than big donors. And so my interest in it is like any other Americans until the Citizens United case, where what I had seen in my career before that in the courts and in the Supreme Court was the same kind of activism of justices deciding that they would just make up new rules about what the First Amendment meant. So in the Attorney General's office, we were enforcing laws against Wall Street after the 2008 crash. We litigated cases against the tobacco industry. We took on, oil and fossil fuel companies when they started misrepresenting the risks and what they knew about climate. Every one of those instances, those are just three examples. Attorneys, very well paid attorneys for the companies, made arguments because the Supreme Court invited them to, that we couldn't enforce the law against them because everything they did was free speech. So tobacco companies targeting children around schoolyards with cartoon ads, trying to get them addicted to a deadly substance if they got addicted for their lifetimes, as cigarettes. tobacco company said we have a free speech right to run cartoon ads 5 feet high around schoolyards. The Supreme Court agreed. We won in every court up until the Supreme Court. We lost 5-4, and the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment protected tobacco companies from law enforcement. So I had seen this over and over again. So I in my career, like many people who practice law, but not, Americans more widely weren't really invited to this conversation about, hey, let's talk about the First Amendment as a way to block law enforcement that the public actually wants. But the lawyers were busy doing it, and that troubled me. So when the Citizens United case came along, I saw, well, here they're going to do it again, this time with anti-corruption laws, and we're not going to be able to enforce those either, because the same free speech theory that if you have a lot of power and you have a lot of money, you can use it any way you want, no matter what the public laws say. Just call it free speech.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cases obviously that you can point to talk about just obviously failures in the system. Would you call this all these issues that we're seeing, whether it's money in politics or decisions that sort of pollute democracy in other ways? Do you think this is just like a built-in systematic failure of the American political system, or is this kind of just like legal political corruption, essentially people taking advantage of the holes, or some combination of both?
No, I'll only speak for what I know, which is, this issue. We have a lot of issues in American self government and freedom and democracy, but we always do in history, and we've had a challenging history. The reason we're called American Promise is because we think the promise of freedom and equal citizenship and self-government of human beings, which is pretty rare in human history,
Yeah,
as you know, Ben, you focus on
definitely.
you focus on history. What we've got is a pretty rare thing, but it's never been easy. So I don't expect or define democracy as some kind of nirvana that is supposed to be perfect. And I'm from Boston, so it's always messy. It's always
Have a
messy.
little bit more hope. Yeah,
It's
that's
always
fair.
messy, and so I don't. I think the systemic failure is the systemic corruption we have as a consequence of a mistaken constitutional theory that says spending money to influence the election outcomes, whether you're a foreign corporation, billionaire, or whatever, is a free speech right, immune to anti-corruption laws that would limit that spending. So that's a new theory. It didn't for 200 years in American history. The First Amendment had nothing to do with anti-corruption laws that address money in politics, and we had plenty of them. It's a new theory, so I don't say the theory is like a systemic failure. It was an argument, and I respect the argument that amplifying speech has something to do with the First Amendment, and spending money amplifies speech. The mistake was to say that the rights of other citizens don't matter, and that the free speech rights and other rights of representation of your fellow Americans can just get wiped out if you have more money. That's the mistake, but it's a mistake. And the system, frankly, is working because we are amending the Constitution to fix that mistake. And we're not the first generation to do it. It's what Americans have always done. That's why we have 27 amendments. 8 of them nullified Supreme Court mistakes, and this will be the ninth. And we're well along with 23 states already on board, a couple hundred members of Congress ready to vote for this thing. We need a 2/3 vote in Congress, ratification in 3/4 of the states. Almost all Americans support this effort. It's 3 out of 4 are ready to go on the amendment. So we got a big issue. Americans know what we think about the issue. We know what the fix is. We just have to go out and do it. And that's what we're doing at American Promise. So I'd say that's the system working pretty well. We just, as citizens, got to get in the game and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of progress towards that is pretty impressive. I mean, I know constitutional amendments. I mean, there's been a long history of constitutional amendments that have also gotten very close and fallen short, like the Equal Rights Amendment. For example, what do you think is like the last few keys you need for success to get this passed? Because obviously there's, you know, still quite a bit of challenges when it comes to just the dynamics of politics today in the country, and from the the presidency and to other legislators that may just want to push back against this no matter what, because it's politically beneficial to them for whatever reason. What do you see as like the last few things you need to do, that you or the challenges remaining on this?
Yeah. Well, listen, I look at it a little differently. First, I would say what we need to do, because American Promise isn't going to amend the Constitution. Our job is to serve Americans, all of us. And that's why we're Republicans, we're Democrats, we're independents at every level of our organization. When we say we're cross partisan, we mean it. So, what we need to do as Americans is earn the support of a two-thirds vote in Congress and ratification in three-quarters of the state's legislatures. So it's not an easy lift, but it's simple math. We need 290 votes in the House, 67 in the Senate, majority votes in 38 state legislatures. So for the last better part of a decade, we've set about working with Americans across the political spectrum. And that's why 23 states now have said we are ready for ratification. They have voted on and passed resolutions saying, Congress, vote on the amendment. We want to ratify it. The most recent state, Ben, number 23, was Utah. And if anyone thinks we can't get the votes of politicians on that, look at Utah. The vote was 63-9 in the House for us. It was 20-4 in the Senate. Oklahoma, the same day, unanimous in the House. We passed the Senate in Wyoming. We don't think there's any state where Americans can't get our elected legislators to do what we want them to do, which is support the constitutional amendment, the For Our Freedom Amendment, so we can actually have decide for ourselves what kind of rules we want around money and politics, and stop having five justices in Washington, D.C., who, to their credit, aren't political and they don't know much about politics. And they
Yeah.
really have made a mess here. But we get this amendment done, we can fix it. So, to your question about what's the next thing, it's a tipping point. That's what happens with amendments. They seem like they're impossible. You can't amend the Constitution. And then all of a sudden you do it. And then it's like, oh, everyone was for that. It's, of course, we're going to amend the Constitution. Who would be against that, right? Like women voting, that was a hard thing. And then it was an obvious thing, right? And that's what's happening with this one. So the tipping point is here. That's why we're seeing those kind of votes that I just described. That's why we're seeing the support in Congress. It's why we're seeing overwhelming consensus of the American people. So there is no divide on this issue whatsoever. It's the numbers don't change: Republican, Democrat, Independent, and all the way to the right, far right, and the far left, and everyone in between. And the politicians are going to want it. They tell us they're raising money like 70% of the time. You think they like that? They're getting super PAC attacks on them and their families out of nowhere. One person who decides that this person should be removed because maybe they have an investment in something that it would be better if they didn't have to be regulated or whatever, and they can just take you out. Or you could find yourself like Susan Collins is now, going into a 2026 Senate election. They're projecting in the state of Maine to be $600 million.
Yeah.
And you
Jeez.
think a politician wants to keep doing that? I don't think so. So that's why we're seeing the support. The tipping point is coming. The only thing that can stop it is ourselves. So I'd urge all of your listeners to get on this great train at AmericanPromise.net, and we can get this problem fixed.
Yeah, no, definitely inspiring and great cause. I hope that also more and more people are seeing, given the influx in like state house races and just state races in general of money, where, back in like the 60s or something, it's worth, you may be spending a few $100s to run for a state office. And now there's millions of dollars being dumped into these races. I hope that's becoming more visible to people as well. And perhaps you're seeing that as one of the reasons why there is this turning point, with so much money being spent on local races now.
Yeah, Ben, it's a really good point, and people definitely see it. We see it in the states we're in and that we're working in. People there are telling us not only is it's a state legislative race that millions of dollars are coming in. It's also in like district attorneys races or school committee races where you have super PACs now running attack ads and local elections in people's communities. And the money is coming from outside. The money's coming from outside the state. The money's even coming from foreign governments through wholly owned companies. And you know, if that is something that we don't stop, we are really facing a problem. And there's so many ways that is such a problem, but it's also driving this movement to amend the Constitution with the 4 Hour Freedom Amendment because it really comes home. It's not an abstract issue. I mean, people, it affects their jobs, it affects their schools, it affects their communities, and it's nationalizing every single, even local election with this toxic division. So people want it fixed, and I think you're absolutely right. The way it's come now, right down to the local level, is driving a lot of the urgency to get this fixed.
Would you say there's like a particular time frame that you're hoping that this gets passed within um, in the near future, or do you? Is that something that it's like on your mind? Like, oh, okay, I feel like we have a chance to get this done within, this, this few years or this decade.
Yeah, I think we're going to get it done soon. And I do want to go back to something you said, Ben, about the ERA and amendments come out and they don't get ratified and things like that. The ERA was actually an exception, and we talked to Gloria Steinem when we started. Gloria Steinem led the ERA fight, and we asked her what went wrong with the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. Got the vote in Congress, but then got blocked in ratification in the states. And she said we didn't organize enough in the states before the congressional vote. We should have gone to the states more. And we talked to the people who won the 26th Amendment. That was 1971. They're still with us. You can talk to them,
Yeah,
ask them,
yeah.
how did you do that? So we did.
Oh yeah.
We talked to them. And they told us that lowered the voting age to 18. And they said the way we did it, we started in the states. It worked in the states. And that way, came out of Congress, you get quick ratification. Almost all the amendments that come out of Congress get rapid ratification within 18 to 24 months. So on timing, we're looking to get this done in this decade. This isn't like a long-term project. I mean, it is in some senses. This idea has been around for 40 years. It was first introduced by Senator Ted Stevens, a Republican from Alaska, like back in the early 90s. So this problem has been with us for a few years. It's now reached such an urgency that amendment idea has found its moment. And that's the last thing I'll say about the timing is that's really key, is that we see that amendments happen in moments of American history. So we did 4 constitutional amendments between 1961 and 1971. We did 4 constitutional amendments in this same 10-year period between 1910 and 1920. And if you look at those time periods, they were very much like our own. Terrible dysfunction, disruption, technological change, massive immigration, division, political assassination, pandemic, war, you name it. And yet Americans dug deep and said, if we want this project to continue, we gotta do some constitutional adjustments. And I think that's what happens. And I think that's what we're seeing now, that there is a constitutional moment in this country. We may not be the only amendment. I think we're the furthest along, the one that most Americans know we got to fix this. But there's live conversations around term limits, around fiscal responsibility, around the Electoral College, around lots of things, because Americans know, we got to update for the,
Yeah.
the 21st century. We're well into now, and we got some big problems coming at us that we can strengthen our constitutional system for. And I think one of the most positive and one of the ones that'll happen quickest in the next few years is the 4 Hour Freedom Amendment on money in politics.
Yeah, I love that you cite so much history when it comes to formulating why we can do this and how we can do this, because I do think that's such a crucial thing, and something that is, I think, very much lacking a lot when there's a lot of public communication about efforts like this. Because I think you really need that history of our country overcoming challenges to help inspire hope in the current generation, where a lot of people have, forgotten kind of the history of the country and all the things that we've overcome. So I do think that's like a critical element. Obviously, I'm biased as I'm a historian, but I do think it's a critical element to these types of arguments to show like, hey, we can do this and get this done. So
Yeah, no, I think so too, and I think Americans get it. I mean, many of us are watching Ken Burns' Revolution and
That's right.
arguing about it because we're Americans. We'll argue about things and we'll
Of
have
course.
different perspectives and different criticisms of it. But you look at that history, we eat it up all the time. Americans are, see the Civil War, we see the Revolution, we see, D-Day. We know we've been through hard times in this country, and yet we're capable of, coming through hard times with doing great things too. And we also, I think, know if most people in their families and their own histories, or whether they're new to the country, they've human condition is pretty hard. There's always like difficult circumstances, and in those circumstances, you do the big things too. And so it isn't like people should, are sitting around waiting. Oh, let's wait till everything's peaceful and fine, and then we'll go fix it. It's when the chips are down that we actually fix it. And I think that's what we're seeing now, and I think it's encouraging. I think people do dig back into history, and we start telling ourselves the stories again of like, how did we get here? How did, what did people do when things were falling apart and previously? Because we can definitely learn from them, and if they can do it, we can do it. We've got a lot of advantages, and shame on us if we don't fix these problems and come out stronger.
Definitely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, I mean, I have a kind of a reflective question then for you. Thinking about this in kind of an oral history sense a bit. So, right now you're in this moment. You're on the cusp of trying to get this major amendment passed. What do you want future generations to know about this cause and your efforts into this? Or thinking, people 100 years from now that if they listen to this interview, what would you want to say about this? That might be impactful to them and whatever challenges they're going through.
Good luck, guys. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, seriously, I think I honestly, what advice can we give to people who we can have no idea what troubles they are facing? And I think, the beauty of America and freedom and our democracy, messy as it is that um, we're always adapting and resilient to new situations, and they will be too. They don't need my advice. We're doing our best right here, right now. And I think the lesson that I would impart from my very small role in our moment in this time, like so many other people, is get in the game. Don't wait for somebody else to do it, to fix it, because it turns out that the challenge and the beauty of American democracy is there isn't anyone coming to save us.
That's
It really
true.
is us. And
Yeah,
so if I had anything to say for whatever problems or crises or things they are wrestling with, which no doubt they will be, is don't wait for any other savior. Go see what you can do about it, and pick your area where you have something to offer and that interests you, and give something, to the country in the future and yourself by getting involved. And I think that's what we've always done. I'm sure they will do that
yeah,
too. They don't need to
yeah.
hear it from me, but
We'll
I think
figure it out. That's
that's
right.
what it's all about. Yeah.
What obviously you've seen a lot of progress, at America Promise, tackling this issue, but what in general, gives you hope for American democracy in these times? Because there's a lot of very, well-known political commentators that are not very hopeful and often, say a lot of things that are kind of, I feel like pretty negative about the future of the country. But I get the impression that you have a lot of hope and a lot of positivity, which I think is also like very much needed for getting through challenging times. So where does this come from exactly?
Well, I don't want to, I'm not naive. I know I know we have serious global and national challenges and threats. Someone accused me of being an apocalyptimist. So, I, I,
Fair
and
enough.
and I think I'll plead guilty to that. That I do think, we will continue to have, and it's just the nature of things, very serious challenges. And the outcome isn't up to us. So, I mean, it is up to us, but we don't know we don't know how the story ends, right? And that's the whole human story, not just this amendment or even
True.
American democracy. We don't know exactly how the story is going to end. So what we can look at is what do we have right here? And when I look around, and I'm blessed to do this work at American Promise, I see Americans unified on this issue. I see thousands and thousands of volunteers going out, clipboards in hand, getting petitions, in the snow and the cold, and I see business leaders and others. Making the arguments to legislators to, let's get this constitutional amendment and stop this crazy corrupt money system in our elections. And so, I'm blessed to get the hope from what people are doing and the results. If sometimes if someone's getting discouraged, I just, say, step back and take a look, not only at what we're at American Promise are doing, but at some of the things that this American story has done. Most of the Constitution, the parts that we think of, we elect senators, women vote, term limits for presidents, lots of things are only there because people did amendments over the years. So to me, it just seems like, it's not a question of optimism or pessimism. It's just, and I agree with you. There's a lot of doom saying, and maybe that gets more clicks. Um,
Probably, yeah.
but there's also a lot of work to do, and any good work does not usually result from shouting, "We are doomed. Let's go." It's I think it's like we got some opportunity here. Let's seize it, both because it's true and because it's more fun, frankly.
Definitely. So I think you touched on this a little bit, but how can people get involved with America Promise? How can they help out with this movement?
There's so many ways because it really is a movement for all Americans. Truly, we don't care who you vote for. We don't care what your party is. If you're an American and you want to help stop the number one problem in this country, the number one threat, and it's not just me saying that, that's according to Pew and all the surveys, number one threat to American democracy, the corruption crisis of money in politics. Go to AmericanPromise.net, all one word, AmericanPromise.net. You can sign the Citizen Pledge, and that's really important. What you're saying is, hey, I support the constitutional amendment. And a lot of that, you think, oh, that's just a petition, right? No, it's actually, what was the Declaration of Independence, but a signature on the line, right? It is saying we're going there. We're doing it. And that's really important because we give each other the confidence that, yeah, like, we can amend the Constitution. Who are we to say we can't? So sign the pledge, go to American Promise, or just learn more. If you're not ready to sign, check it out, AmericanPromise.net, and you can learn more about it. The For Our Freedom Amendment is up there. By the way, it fits on a napkin. This is not
There you go. Yeah.
not a 10,000 page campaign finance law. It's a constitutional amendment. That's simple, clear words that gives us the power back as Americans, our legislatures, our members of Congress, to get the anti corruption guardrails we need. So you can also sign up to volunteer if you want. You can check the state map out and see whether your state's one of the 23. And if it is, there's more work to be done. So still sign up to volunteer. And if it isn't, definitely sign up to volunteer. You can donate, of course. We got a great staff, and their job is to serve Americans and help us do this. So, it does take money. We're not kidding about that. And we're serious about winning this. So, if you want to donate, but we have networks, business networks, student networks. So, sign up is the first step, AmericanPromise.net. And then you're in the game and you can make history and amend the Constitution to stop the corruption crisis of money in politics.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the work you do, because this is obviously an incredibly important issue, and there's always a need for people to kind of step up and help people know about, like, hey, this is what we can do about it, and it is fixable, and we can get over this challenge. So just really appreciate all the work you do, and for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, Ben. Really glad to talk with you.